Happy Friday, Mountain Movers. One of the core values at our church is we will lead the way with irrational generosity. We truly believe it's more blessed to give than receive. And in my journey, I would say it was a journey to generosity. And it didn't start with my heart being generous. That's not something that came natural to me. If you look at the world in the lens of givers versus takers, I was definitely a taker. I always thought, what's in it for me? If I'm chasing something or someone, it's always, what do I get out of it? And that led me to very hollow places and turned me into a pretty selfish person. And luckily, through God and through a bunch of great relationships, I got to see people living a very generous life where I was like, man, I want to try that on for size. And so I had to take some steps and some reps in generosity that almost were fake. Like I had to try it on several times. And what I've grown to know is it is so fulfilling to be on that giver side of the fence. And generosity isn't just your money, but it's your time. It's pouring time into causes, pouring time into people, standing for a purpose that's something bigger than yourself. And when the church says we truly believe it's more blessed to give than receive, I see that now through the lens of a giver and know that it's almost selfish for me to give because I know the joy it brings and I know the impact that it can make. And so if you're looking at the side of the fence, giving versus taking, where do you find yourself? Maybe you hop on both sides of the fence. Maybe you're a little bit too much on the taker side. But even if you're on the giver side, how can you increase your generosity? How can you stretch yourself a little bit where you get a little bit uncomfortable, but you find the joy on the other side? Because I can't think of any time where we exercised generosity as a family and we regretted it. It's always made an impact and it's always fulfilling for a purpose bigger than ourselves. Next, I want to talk about the word yet and the power of the word yet. Because we have a lot of power in our words. That's why these messages get shared each week. That's why we go to church. That's why we go to leadership conferences. That's why we huddle and whiteboard together, because there's a lot more power in words than we give credit for. And sometimes we can say things that really diminish our value, diminish our growth, and really put us in a box. I'm not good enough. I'm not a good leader. I'm not a good spouse. I will not hit this goal. We aren't growing to our potential. What if you added yet to the end of those statements? So I'm not a good leader yet. I'm not going to hit this goal yet. What does that word yet do? It opens the door to possibility. When you add that, you start thinking of the action to put behind that word. If you leave it open to I'm not a good leader yet, now you can define, well, what is the next step where I can fulfill that, rather than putting yourself in that negative box, because that negative box can manifest and actually turn you into that person that you weren't originally when you said that. So there's power in words. Where in your life do you need to add the word yet and then take that next step of action to try to become better? And then the last one is just a cool story from the gym this week, where almost every single day when I work out, I wear a Move Your Mountain t-shirt. And I'm always hoping it's a conversation starter. And in the years that I've been wearing those shirts, it's happened very few times, far less than I dreamt up. And this past weekend when I was serving at church, the guy I was holding the door with was a heavy metal guy, just like me. And we listen to heavy metal when we lift. And he was telling me a story of how he transitioned from heavy metal to worship music, and now he can't get enough of it. And just last week I was telling him, man, I just can't make that switch. Maybe I should have used the word yet to take my own advice. But then fast forward a few days, and when I got to the gym, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to try worship music. And so through the whole workout, I was listening to worship music. And then this guy just randomly approached and just asked the question, how do I move mountains in my life? And it just filled my cup. And more importantly, because God was centered in that workout, I was ready for a response that didn't have to do with a business, didn't have to do with a company, but it had to do with faith and pouring into that person. And the guy's name was Omar. And at the end of our conversation, I asked him, what can I be praying for in your life? And he opened up about a torn marriage and asked for prayers on restoration and healing. And it was a good opportunity to pray for Omar. And so that taught me that I need to be centered in the truth, the word, prayer. And when I'm centered in that, God's going to provide opportunities to work in me and through me. And maybe that combination of the shirt plus being centered in my faith opened those doors. And so the encouragement for you in that is, if you're looking for God to work in you and through you, what are you doing to get to that level, whether that's in prayer, in worship music, time in the Word, going to church, a small group that's pouring into each other. When I have all of those things churning, God shows up. It's just a fact. Finish strong and have a great weekend.